Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. I want to give a big welcome to everyone that's already logged in and joining us. And I have a few announcements as we get started as well. So first, just a warm welcome to everyone. This webinar is WordPress without the worry, going headless with Gatsby. And we have some really great speakers lined up today. This webinar is being recorded, and we will have the recording available on our website a little bit later today. Also, everyone who registered for the webinar will get an email with that link to the recording. So if there's any section of the webinar that you missed, you can catch it on the recording. Also, all the attendees will be on mute throughout the entire webinar. That just helps cut down on extraneous noise, but we do want you to interact and participate. So as you have questions throughout the presentations, please use the question window to submit those questions. I see a couple have come in already. So please continue to use that and submit your questions that way. We will also make sure any questions we don't get to throughout the presentations, we will have set aside some time at the end of the presentations to go over that Q&A also. One reminder is feel free to follow us on Twitter at GatsbyJS. You can tweet about what you see here, ask questions there as well, and we'll have someone monitoring that Twitter handle throughout the webinar. So to get started, let me introduce our great speakers. First of all, we have Robin Zimmer, who is a full stack web developer with agency Jamboree. And Robin began his career in marketing and sales in the insurance industry before realizing that wasn't really the path he wanted to take, and he switched to web development at a digital agency, first as a project manager and then later as a front-end developer. Robin lives in Vancouver, and when not working, Robin is a skilled and dedicated soccer player and keeps reminding us that Germany has 4 World Cup titles while Canada hasn't qualified since 1986. So I think there's some fighting words there. And I should have mentioned, Robin went to university in Germany, so I think that contributes to some of the loyalty there. Second, we have Blaine Yamakawa, also with Agency Jamboree. And Blaine began his career as a business systems consultant with HSBC. He was following his passion for creative work and moved into digital advertising and media, where he successfully ran his own company for about 5 years. But now Blaine oversees web development, online, and mobile advertising. He's a self-professed home automation tech nerd, an 80s hair metal band fan, which my partner would really enjoy talking with you about that, and a vintage skateboard collector. And last but not least, we have Jason Ball, who is with Gatsby, a software engineer. He is also the creator and maintainer of WP GraphQL, which is a free and open source plugin that brings GraphQL to any WordPress site. And in his free time, Jason enjoys crafting funny puns, which he posts on Twitter. So if any of you aren't following Jason on Twitter, that is a fun thing to do. Okay, we're actually going to start with a poll question. So this is interactive, and everyone just go ahead and look at the screen as soon as the poll comes up. There we go. What CMSs have you used or want to use with Gatsby? You can choose any of the above or other. There are a lot of CMSs out there to choose, so obviously I couldn't list them all. So go ahead, if your answer is other, put what CMS you're preferring to use in the chat window. You can add that there. So I'm going to collect a few. Oh, good. We have 80% voted. So I'm going to close the poll in just a second and share the results. And it looks like it's still coming up, but obviously a lot of WordPress users here for good reason, since this webinar is focused on WordPress. So that's great, 88%. But quite a few Contentful and other CMS users as well. So thank you for participating in that poll. We'll have a couple more questions a little bit later on in the webinar as well. Now with that, I'm going to send this over to our first presenter, and let me do that, make presenter. And Blaine Yamakawa with Jamboree is going to present for us first.
Great, thank you, Linda. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Blaine Yamakawa, and I'm the project manager here at Jamboree. Today, we're going headless with WordPress and Gatsby. And to start, I'm going to talk about the following items on the screen. First, I'll speak briefly about Jamboree, the company Robin and I work for. I'll talk about the background of the company and the services we offer. I'll also go over a few recent projects that we've completed. Second, I'll speak about the website we're demoing today called realcedar.com. My portion will be more high level about the company, a bit about the background of who they are and what they do, whereas my colleague Robin will go more into the details about the features and technical information. Next, I'll talk about realcedar.com and how it was previously on WordPress and the problems and issues that came about having the site on a pure WordPress installation. If any of you have managed a WordPress site before, you'll know there's a lot of headaches that go along with it. Next, I'll hand it over to Robin to discuss the features we've incorporated, as well as the tech stack and code samples, basically the stuff you're all here for. Lastly, we'll give you our outlook and synopsis of the project and where we'll go moving forward. So we have been building Jamstack websites, specifically Gatsby and Headless WordPress, since late 2018 under our parent company division called Bear Advertising. Jamboree, which is purposely spelled incorrectly with an A and not an O, was created in March 2020 to specifically market the strength of our Jamstack web dev team. So as you all know, since COVID kind of hit us, the focus on digital has never been stronger, where everyone obviously is online shopping, working, studying, communicating. Therefore, we found it was a big opportunity for us to create a pure web dev shop specializing in Gatsby and Jamstack. Next, I'll go into some of Jamboree's recent projects. Note these are all headless WordPress sites with a Gatsby front end. So paralleldomain.com, this was a purely development project where we worked with their designer to help develop their website. So this is a Silicon Valley based company and they automate system training and use case testing. Next is the deckingsuperstore.com. So we did the design, development, content writing, image sourcing, basically everything on this project. So they're also located in San Jose, California, and they're the #1 decking and siding retailer in the San Francisco Bay Area. Lastly, charlesdavidyachts.com, we also did the development and design on this project. So this is a high-end yacht sales and brokerage company located on Vancouver Island in Nanaimo, where their listings of yachts are pulled directly from the Yacht World API. Next, I'll talk about realcedar.com. So this is a company located here in Vancouver, BC, where they represent Western red cedar companies worldwide. So these companies range from loggers out in the forests to the Home Depots where you would purchase Western red cedar lumber for like your housing projects, etc. So realcedar.com is the largest online resource of Western red cedar in the world, with over 1 million visitors in 2019, and we're projected to hit 2 million visitors in 2020. This is also a multi-country website, and it's available in 6 different countries and 4 different languages. It's also important to note that this is not an e-commerce website. It's purely informational. However, we do allow our visitors to submit quote requests online direct to retailers via web forms. So last year, the client approached us with some issues they had with the site. Issues such as slow performance when browsing pages, dwindling organic traffic numbers, SEO results where their main keywords were falling in the rankings. And for us, as the developer and maintainer of the site, we also had the following pain points with WordPress. Scalability and keeping up with the client demands for additional content. So as you know, adding more plugins and features equals slower performance with WordPress. We also had constant and costly page speed optimization efforts that were needed to be made in order to keep up with these additional features. And as you know, WordPress is kind of a haven for hackers, being the #1 CMS in the world. I think the stat is something like over 30% of all websites are on WordPress. Therefore, it's an easy target for hackers to go after a site that's so widely used and popular. Lastly, SEO was difficult to maintain due to the slow performance of this website. So as you know, probably know as well, SEO with Google, they do rank sites that have faster page load times. Therefore, it's difficult to rank a site that doesn't perform well. So for those reasons above, a transformation to Gatsby made sense for all of us, not only for the client, but for our own development and basically our own sanity. So next, I'll pass things over to Robin, and we'll get into more of the more exciting stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Blaine, and hi everyone. I'm going to take over now, and I'm going to guide you through the process of transforming a regular WordPress website to a Gatsby site with a headless WordPress backend. So let's get started. First of all, I want to talk about the requirements for this project, and then introduce the architecture we came up with. After that, I will show you the general setup on the WordPress and Gatsby side of things. I'm not going to dive too deeply into technical aspects because there are plenty of good tutorials out there, but I will showcase some code examples whenever necessary. I also had a quick look at Jason's slides, and he's going to tell you more about the setup anyway. In the next few chapters, I will talk about a few pain points we've encountered within this and many other projects, as well as the solutions we came up with. So let's start with the requirements. As Blaine mentioned earlier, performance was the biggest issue on the former website, caused by too many and too heavy plugins. The load times reach up to 3 seconds, which is a killer for every conversion-driven website. That's why we suggested Gatsby as the new front-end framework. Furthermore, the client wanted to keep having one backend for all 6 websites to make content editing as easy as possible. We've never done anything like this before in Gatsby, so this was one of the biggest challenges in the project. The last requirement evolved from the wish to create new individual landing pages on the fly without the help of a developer, something you can usually achieve with a page builder plugin. Here, we decided to use ACF flexible content fields. I'm not going to explain ACF itself, since it's one of the most popular WordPress plugins out there. The next part deals with the architecture of our Jamstack solution. And here, I will start with the high-level architecture. First of all, we have WordPress as the data source, which is hosted on WP Engine. And just as a side note, working with them has been an absolute game changer for our agency, and I would definitely recommend to check them out. Right beside, we have Netlify. It's our build and hosting service for the Gatsby front-end side. The Netlify account contains 6 separate websites, one for each language. This way, we can trigger builds for specific languages and not all of them rebuild at once. And here is how the process would look like. Once the user updates a page, he triggers a build from within WordPress. Netlify then pulls the repository from GitLab and starts the Gatsby build command. Gatsby then fetches data from WordPress and builds out the pages. we use environmental variables to accommodate for the different languages. Once the build is ready, Netlify deploys the static pages to their global CDN. And next, I'm going to talk about the setup of the WordPress and Gatsby side of things. So we dive one level deeper to WordPress. And before I start, one more thing. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to use the color red for WordPress related and blue for Gatsby related things. We use Polylang to make the site multilingual and advanced custom fields for the page builder functionality. To make the connection between WordPress and Gatsby possible, we need to install a few more plugins which are specific to a headless WordPress setup. First of all, we need WP Gatsby, which is the glue between WordPress and the new Gatsby source WordPress plugin. Besides that, we need WP GraphQL, which adds a GraphQL endpoint to WordPress. I'm not going to go into details here because our next speaker, Jason, will tell you more about this anyway. And furthermore, we need to transform the Polylang and ACF data structure into the GraphQL schema, so the source plugin can consume this data. Luckily, the developer community around Gatsby is really great, and usually an integration already exists, at least for all popular plugins. You can find a list of available plugins at wpgraphql.com/extensions. So now that we've added the required data to GraphQL, we can take care of setting up the Gatsby side of things. At first, we have to initialize the Gatsby source WordPress plugin in Gatsby config. The plugin is still in beta version, but I was told that version 1 will be released in the next couple of weeks. Behind the scenes, the source plugin will, amongst other things, create nodes out of every single data type, so we can query for them as needed. And this is what we're going to do in the next step. In Gatsby node, we query for all post types, loop through each of them, and then query all nodes within the post type. Because our website is multilingual, we're going to set a filter here when we query for content nodes, so we don't create pages for all languages on all sites. And this is how the page query looks, for example. We can simply filter by slug and our environmental variable, which is Gatsby active language, and the variable looks like a lowercase language code like EN or NZ, which is set up within Polylang. And besides the URI, we also query for the page language and the translations, which are set up with Polylang. This becomes important when we later on add special meta tags to the head of the website to tell Google that those pages are copies. Those so-called canonical tags are absolutely necessary to avoid SEO penalties for duplicated content. Because technically, we deal with completely different websites here. And since we have multiple English versions with the US, New Zealand, and the UK, we also have the same content multiple times. After querying the data for our target language, we loop through the nodes and create pages out of them and pass in the correct template path based on the post type. In our example, template 1 is the page which renders the flexible content elements, whereas template 2 and 3 are generic post pages with a static hero image and a content section. So on the next slides, I will focus on the flexible content element, and I will show you how to query and render the components conditionally. Here you can see the query for the page template. Besides the title and the URI, we query for ACF, which is the ACF field group, modules, which is the ACF flexible content field within the field group, and fragments for each flexible content element. What I usually do to write out such a query is simply opening the GraphQL environment and then select all possible options and copy the result query in here. In the page component itself, I return a custom flexible content component, which I'm going to explain in more detail on the next slide. This component takes in rows as a prop, which represents the individual flexible content modules per page. Then I loop over them and extract the type name. The type name is the main query parameter that you saw earlier. So in this example here, it's WP page underscore ACF underscore hero image. So we're simply going to grab the last piece and map it against an object of component, which I imported at the top. The only thing left is returning the component and splicing in the rest properties. One thing to mention about this approach is that Gatsby actually doesn't support code splitting for flexible content elements yet. That means that every page will load the JavaScript for every component, even though they don't use them. But I've seen that people are working on a PR for this, and hopefully this feature will be integrated into the core soon, because this will speed up load times drastically. And that's it for the basic setup of the WordPress Gatsby site. Currently, the website has over 30 flexible content modules, and we are still adding new ones. After showcasing the general setup of our Gatsby application, we're going to talk about some of the major pain points when it comes to developing with headless WordPress sites. We are starting with images, and I'm sure all of you have experienced some kind of headache when it comes to images. First of all, the Gatsby image library is awesome because it takes care of so many things I used to manually do when optimizing website performance. But as soon as you reach a certain number of images, it becomes problematic. Whoever had to deal with thousands of images at a time knows that downloading and transforming them can take forever. Especially doing development, it's a pain when you, an example, have to invalidate the cache to make something else work, and then you have to download and process them all over again. On the RealCedar website, we encountered this exact problem. There was a gallery with around 1,500 images, blog posts with around 500 images, and around 500 more images on all the other pages of the website. So that's 2,500 images in total. How did we solve this problem? The idea was to simply outsource the main load to a different service. So here is our architecture diagram again, and we're going to update it. For the blog posts, we are using the WordPress plugin Jetpack. It doesn't add much value to our headless WordPress site, but it offers a free CDN for images. So as soon as you activate the service, you will notice that the URLs in your media library change immediately. The only other thing we need to do in order to use this feature is telling the Gatsby source WordPress plugin to ignore images in WYSIWYG editors. And we can do that by simply adding an option, use Gatsby image false. For the gallery, we switch to Cloudinary, an image storage solution which offers a neat API, so we can dynamically fetch images by category and search query. We can also add watermarks and even resize the images on the fly. Since we don't want to expose our API keys, we can't connect directly to Cloudinary from our Gatsby frontend. Instead, we have to either invoke a Lambda function, or like in our case, create a custom WordPress plugin to fetch the data. And now that there are just 500 images left to process, we didn't run into any issues anymore. And now we continue with forms, one of the biggest obstacles for Gatsby sites we've dealt with in the past. There are solutions out there like Netlify forms or other third-party integrations. But for bigger sites, you easily reach the limit of the free tier, and then it can get expensive. That's why we wanted to go with a WordPress solution. So we came up with Gravity Forms. To be fair, it's not a free plugin, but relatively cheap for an agency when you use it for all your website projects. The most distinguishing thing about this plugin is that they've integrated REST API supports to fetch forms and to send form submissions. That means we don't need an additional WP GraphQL add-on to transform the data back and forth. To make the connection work with Gatsby, we have to add the plugin Gatsby Source Gravity Forms. Here, you have to pass in your API keys, which you generate in the WordPress settings, and then it will create nodes of the forms, which we can query via static query in one of our flexible content modules. Once we've done that, we need a solution to build out the form dynamically, so the editor can make form updates in the backend without the help of a developer. There are some solutions out there, like Gatsby Gravity Forms Component, which was developed by the same guy as Gatsby Source Gravity Forms, but they aren't perfect yet because they're missing some important fields and functionalities. So in the end, we developed our own solution based on Mozilla's React.json schema model. It's still by far not perfect yet, but we will continue developing it if new requirements arise in other projects. The next point on the list is a typical pain point as well: how to handle searches. For cost reasons, we didn't want to go with a paid solution like Algolia and decided to build a custom solution instead. And as it turns out, developing a custom search endpoint was quite easy after all. Here you can see an excerpt of the WordPress plugin. We simply query for posts based on the provided query string and language, and return the post title and URL. We could have easily added additional logic to return, in example, the post excerpt as well, but that wasn't really necessary for our use case. The next issue we dealt with along the way were increasing build times. Up to a point, it became a real pain to maintain the site. To solve this issue, we addressed 3 different topics to speed up the build process once and for all. We looked at caching, data fetching, and images. The first one was pretty obvious. We enabled caching. But the caching solution we had came with a pitfall, because at one point in the project, our build times increased dramatically. Our solution at this time, the Gatsby plugin Netlify Cache, stopped working. And as it turns out, a Gatsby upgrade in May made this plugin unusable. So we had to look for something else. And thank God, there was another solution called Netlify plugin Gatsby Cache. We just had to add it to our Netlify TOML file, and we were back on track with our builds. The next point on the list is data fetching. In general, you want to make sure that you only fetch data you need from the WordPress GraphQL endpoint. And since we are dealing with multiple websites for different languages, it should be easy to reduce the requests of unnecessary nodes. As I mentioned earlier, we have to fetch the pages for all languages on all websites to be able to add canonical tags. I've talked to the plugin author, Tyler Barnes, about this problem, and he might add a filter for this use case at some point. But for now, we can't really do anything about it. But what we can do to avoid unnecessary data fetching is adding filters for post types, which are just meant for certain websites. In our case, the blog section only applies to the North American website, so we can filter out those nodes for all other languages. And this is how the filter looks like. You can see here the Gatsby config file. You look at our plugins array, and you can see that the Gatsby Source WordPress experimental plugin is initialized. So the only thing we have to do, besides the URL, which is the only required parameter, is add in a type option and then add the post type here, or whatever post type you want to exclude. Then you simply pass in a filter for the desired language and map it against the slug. And that's about it. The websites other than North America won't query for the post type post anymore. The last thing on our build times agenda deals with images. We've already talked about images in the previous chapter, but there's another issue that needs to be taken care of. And this is image sizes within WordPress. We know that the Sharp plugin takes care of image resizing, and Gatsby Image takes care of providing the perfect image size to the visitor of the website. But as long as there is no upload restriction within WordPress, the source plugin has to download unnecessary oversized images, which adds a lot of build minutes in the end. Since WordPress version 5.3, there is a big image threshold, but we run into issues with it because WordPress renamed the file, but the source plugin didn't know about that. So we had to deactivate it and use another solution instead. There are plenty of other options out there to take care of this. And one example is the plugin Resize Image After Upload. And this is how we took care of build time. And that's it from my side about the transformation to a headless WordPress site. So what is the result? 6 individual blazing fast websites with almost 1,000 different pages. Feel free to have a look after the webinar to check it out yourself. And if you have any feedback, let us know. And now let's have a look at some KPIs.
Thanks, Robin. I'll take over from here. As mentioned earlier, the client did come to us with some current concerns about SEO and performance. So slow page loads, organic traffic slipping, search engine results dropping, etc. So since the transformation to Gatsby in June 2020, we are happy to report the following updates. So organic traffic is up 66% year over year. Although I'm not allowed to give specifics on it's a private information, I can tell you that the increase is in the hundreds of thousands and not something like small, like 1,000 or 2,000 visitors. There's also a 35% increase in overall conversions. These are form submissions and visits to key pages of the website due to improved user experience of the website itself. And we also lastly have 186% increase in downloads. So as this is an informational site, realcedar.com does provide downloads such as project plans, installation guides, and many other resources. So that pretty much concludes our part of the presentation. So thanks everyone and appreciate your time. And I will hand things back to Linda.
Thanks so much, Blaine and Robin. And just a reminder, you can submit your questions in the question window. And we have had a lot of questions come through during your presentation. So Blaine and Robin, if you want to jump into that question window and start answering those. We will also have time at the end of Jason's presentation to go back and go over any questions that we may have missed. So before I hand it over to Jason, another 2 quick polls. One is, have you built a headless WordPress site? So let us know if you've already built one, if you haven't, or if you're considering it, that may be why you're here. So we'll let those answers come in. And then after this quick poll, I'm going to do one more that's a little bit more fun. And oh, good, we have quite a few people that have voted in the poll, so I'll share the results real quick. Good, so about 30% have already built a headless WordPress site, and many of you, over half, haven't done it yet but are considering it. So this is a great webinar for you. And our last poll, what is Blaze? This will be for people that have been paying attention. So go ahead and answer this question, do your best, or feel free to say you have no idea if that's the case. Some of you are getting it, I see. And I'll give you just a few more seconds to put your answer in. Your best guess on Blaze. All right, we're about 70% have voted. So, all right, 18% of you have gotten the answer. So it is the Gatsby WordPress WAPU, which I'm going to share with you real quick because I think it's kind of fun. And I just have to get to my sharing screen. Okay, 1 second. Now I'll make myself the presenter. And I will share my screen real quick. And then after this, we will go to Jason, who will give us a lot more information about WP GraphQL and a demo as well. Oh, I think I might be disconnected for a second. Let's make sure. Hide results, that's what I needed to do. All right, now I'm back on track. Okay, this is Blaze. So this is the new Gatsby WordPress WAPU. For those of you that are in the WordPress community, you might have fun with that. Okay, now I'm going to switch it over to Jason Ball, who is here to talk more about WordPress and Gatsby, specifically WP GraphQL. And I just need to stop sharing 1 second. And Jason, just want to make sure your audio is there.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, and I will share my screen. All right. Yeah, so I'm talking about getting started with Gatsby and WordPress. As Linda said, my name is Jason Ball. I'm a staff software engineer here at Gatsby. And let's get into this. Yeah, so you can find me on GitHub, github.com/JasonBall. Find me on Twitter at Jason Ball. So what this talk is going to cover, it's going to talk about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of Gatsby and WordPress. So let's start with the what. So what is Gatsby and WordPress? Well, WordPress is the most popular CMS in the world, powers approximately 39% of the popular web. Gatsby, of course, is a React framework for building blazing fast websites and apps. And together, WordPress is used as a CMS to manage your content and publish your content, and Gatsby is used as an alternative to the WordPress theming layer to present your content. So the way it works is that you have Gatsby communicating with WordPress using GraphQL, and then data gets fetched from WordPress, cached into Gatsby as Gatsby nodes, and then you can use the Gatsby GraphQL layer to take that data and put it into React components and have a working Gatsby site powered by WordPress. So that's kind of how things work behind the scenes. Why would you consider Gatsby and WordPress? Well, speed. Gatsby sites are fast out of the box. WordPress sites can be made fast, of course, but in some cases it's a full-time job. Security. The end result of a Gatsby site is a static files that you can serve from a CDN, so there's no live database connections when users are interacting with your site. Nothing really to hack with a static file. Modern tooling, developers have access to things like React and TypeScript and component-based architectures, and a lot of fun tools that just aren't available when you're templating in PHP. Using this stack together, you can decouple your concerns, so you can do your WordPress development and your front-end development separately. If you've ever accidentally deployed like a missing semicolon to your WordPress site, you might have what's called the white screen of death, and your entire WordPress site might go down. Where with Gatsby, your Gatsby site can remain up even if you did make a mistake on your WordPress code base. So decoupling concerns has real benefits for developers and users. So who benefits from WordPress and Gatsby? Well, content creators, they get to use a CMS they've already been using for years. Developers get to use modern frameworks and tools, and end users get to browse blazing fast websites. So where? Obviously the cloud. I mean, you can use Gatsby and WordPress wherever on your local development environment. You can deploy to Gatsby Cloud. You can deploy to Netlify anywhere you want. Gatsby Cloud is actually the build service. You can deploy it to any CDN you want. So how do we do this? So there's a couple steps, as they also talked about in the previous talk, but you install a couple WordPress plugins. So you install WP GraphQL and WP Gatsby. You create a Gatsby site. I'm going to show how to do this using a starter. And then you use GraphQL from Gatsby to build some components. And finally, I suggest you deploy with Gatsby Cloud. So you can use an existing WordPress site if you have one. This should work with any existing WordPress site. Or if you need to set up a new one, there's a tool called Local by Flywheel that I recommend to get started. If you've never used WordPress, go to localwp.com, download this tool. It's a free tool. A couple clicks of buttons, you have a WordPress site up on your local machine, and you can start playing around with WordPress that way. So you install WP GraphQL. This is available on the WordPress.org repository as of yesterday. We just launched WP GraphQL 1.0 yesterday. So you can download this from the WordPress repository. And then the second plugin, WP Gatsby, you install this. This is also on the WordPress.org repository. So you install that. And then the next step, we have a starter here, Gatsby Starter WordPress blog. This is on GitHub. I'm showing how to fork that. That's what I would recommend starting with. Fork this starter to your own fork on GitHub. And then on your fork, go into this file, the main Gatsby config.js, and you can change this URL or you can use an environment variable. In my case, I'm going to change it to demo.wpgraphql.com. And then you can connect to Gatsby Cloud. So once you fork the repo, you can connect to Gatsby Cloud, and you'll have a site actually deploying. So this is what it looks like to set up a Gatsby Cloud instance. So you can come to Gatsby Cloud, you can say import from GitHub. It'll allow you to search GitHub repos. So the repo that I just forked is going to be available here. I can say what branch to follow. And then I can set up integrations. This is where I can set up where to deploy to. So I could deploy to Netlify or anything like that. In my case, I just copied a webhook that we're going to put into WordPress in a second. And then I'm configuring here just environment variable here. I showed in the previous step how to just change that in the code, or we can use a environment variable here in Gatsby Cloud. So once this is saved, our WordPress or our Gatsby Cloud site will be hooked up to listen to our GitHub repo for code changes. And then the webhook that I copied, we'll take that and we'll put that into our WP Gatsby settings in the WordPress dashboard. So we put the webhook settings in here, and then we can start previewing content in WordPress. So what's happening here, I go add a new post. Yep, write some content. I want to preview it. So I click preview, and then my post shows up for preview with my content that I just wrote. And then if I want to publish, I'm happy with that preview, right? So what I have here is a screenshot showing WordPress and Gatsby Cloud. When I click publish, it triggers a build over on the right side in Gatsby Cloud. I'm going to click into the logs just to show what's happening. So WordPress said, hey, Gatsby, some content changed. Gatsby Cloud is going to notice that change. It's going to rebuild just the pages that were affected. So in our case, it's going to rebuild the blog post itself and then any paginated pages that it showed up on, and then upload that HTML. And now we can see the new post is on our site. So that's all for like the getting started, but I also want to show an actual demo if I have time, Linda, and can share my screen. I'd like to show just a few minutes of like some live stuff, but if I don't have time, I can skip it.
No, go for it.
All right, cool. So how do I share my screen?
You're still sharing your slides.
Okay. So I can just get out of my slides. Okay, cool. Sweet. So I got this repo over in Code Sandbox, and what this allows us to do, It shut down on me. 1 second. Maybe this was a bad idea. Hold on. I gotta restart Code Sandbox. Give me a second. So what I did here, I took the GitHub repo and I opened it in Code Sandbox, and I was just gonna show what this looks like as a developer using this stack, and how you can start playing with GraphQL to build components with WordPress and Gatsby, as long as this works. Give me a second.
And Jason, while you're working on that, we've had obviously a lot of great questions come through. Our team is trying to get to them all, and we will save a few minutes at the end to also talk about some of them. And Robin and Blaine, if you, as we send you some of those questions, there may be some topics that you want to bring out and discuss during the Q&A. If there's like some themes that you see or a lot of questions being asked along the same topic, we'll have you discuss that during the Q&A for everybody.
All right, I pivoted to local. The Sandbox didn't seem like it was going to fire up, so I'll just show what this is doing locally. So if with that same repo that I was using, you can run Gatsby develop, and it will start up your site at localhost port 8000. So I'll go ahead and open that. And then I just wanted to show a couple things with the GraphQL layer. So this is the site that I was showing, and we can do things like edit some content here, and we would see the content show up right after I edit it. And then what I wanted to show is how the GraphQL layer works. So when you're working in develop mode, you have this graphical API here, and we have this Explorer here, and this is where you can find out what content exists from the GraphQL API. So if you want to query things like posts, you can click all WP post. You can click nodes, which is each individual post node, and then you can ask for data like ID, title, slug, what's a good one, and URI. And then you click this play button and it will return the data that you asked for. And so this is used to build the actual pages. If we look at Gatsby node, what's happening here is we take a query that we write in a tool like Graphical, and we tell WordPress, or we tell Gatsby, I want this query to execute to get all of these posts, and then whatever data that we ask for, and then we pass it to a create page function, which is a Gatsby function that actually creates the static pages. We tell it what template to use. Sorry, where is that? Create page. We tell it what template to use. So in this case, template blog post, and then we can pass it some context. And then on that individual page, we can use queries again to specify what data we want to show. So in our case, we make a query and we display some content here. So let's say I wanted another piece of content. I'm just gonna say like slug, for example. I can write in my GraphQL query on this page template that I want this piece of data. That data is now gonna be available in this component, and I can do something like this and adjust my markup. Put slug in here. Oh, I'm on the wrong, and my local host. So now we'll see the data showing up on the actual site that we're developing. So if I take this away, goes away. If I add it back, it comes back. So we can now use GraphQL to get data from WordPress into Gatsby and into our React components. Have an amazing developer experience, like things like live refresh with content changes. I can do things like, change a color. Let me like give it like style. What is it like? Oh, that's gotta be a string, I think. My bad. Yeah, so I can do things right here and see it live refresh right in front of my eyes. I can go publish content, see it right in front of my eyes. So just a quick demo. Hopefully y'all learned something. I highly suggest checking out Gatsby Cloud. The new wpgraphql.com launched yesterday. wpgraphql.com. This is built using this stack, Gatsby on the front end, WordPress WP GraphQL on the back end, and it's deploying with Gatsby Cloud and incremental builds. And so yeah, that's all now for me.
Great, thanks, Jason. And thanks again to Robin and Blaine for your presentation as well. So now I'm going to change back presenter to myself. If you want to get started with WordPress and Gatsby, we have a WordPress Gatsby experimental plugin that Jason was mentioning. I put the link in the chat window as well. And so you can go ahead and go to that link and get started there. Now we're going to go to a couple of questions, and give me 1 second to share my screen. Whoops. Okay, like I was mentioning before, this you can either go to the link that's in the chat or just go to gatsby.dev/WordPress. That will take you to that plugin where you can get started with WordPress and Gatsby. I also wanted to mention that if you're working on a large enterprise site, a client site, and you're wanting to look into getting the Gatsby team to help with optimizing your site, we do have a new service. It's a concierge service, and you can learn more about it at gatsbyjs.com/concierge. I'll also put that link in the chat window. Okay, now with that, wanted to open it up to the team to answer some of the questions that have come through the question chat window. So first of all, Robin and Blaine, were there any questions you saw that you wanted to kind of bring out and discuss for all the attendees?
I had a question about why we're using multi-language plugin for realseater.com. We use that because we deployed, I'm not sure if it was clear in the beginning of the presentation, but these websites are on separate domains. So they are on local domains around the world. Like for instance, UK is .realseater.co.uk, and Realseater Japan is realseater.jp. So that is the reason why we needed to have a multi-language plugin, and that was kind of the secret of deploying, or the trickiness, I'd say, of deploying the Realseater site, because it's one WordPress installation, but we're pushing builds to separate domains. So I don't know if Robin can evaluate or elaborate a little bit more on that, but that was one of the questions that I had.
Yes, exactly. Like, I think the main reason for the multilingual plugin is the canonical tagging, because otherwise Google wouldn't know that those websites belong together. So eventually Google would flag some of the websites as like duplicated content websites, and this would cause like SEO penalties. And we wanted to avoid that by any chance.
Okay, great. Now this question, sorry, did you have something else, Robin or Blaine?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. That's fine. Thanks, Lida.
Okay. This question might be for Jason. How will Gatsby work with the new WordPress block editor and block patterns?
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with block patterns, but wpgraphql.com is built with Gutenberg, so it works pretty well. I think like 95% of the content, I think there's about 300 and something pages on the new wpgraphql.com, and like 95% of that content is built with Gutenberg. There's various ways you can attempt to use Gutenberg with Gatsby. The way I'm doing it is by querying the content that Gutenberg renders as HTML, much like you would ask for the content that the classic editor would return. And then I pass through React HTML parser to basically convert it into components on the WordPress, or sorry, on the Gatsby side. We are exploring like being able to query blocks as like GraphQL like objects. We were waiting for a while for Gutenberg to have a server-side registry so that WP GraphQL could work with that. And in August, they added an initial server-side registry. It's not super robust yet, but we have some ideas on how we can expose blocks as objects in the GraphQL schema. And then you'd be able to query each individual block and tie it to a component in your Gatsby site. So just keep an eye on it over the coming months, but you can query the content and use it today.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Another question for you, Jason, about Gatsby Cloud and the advantages, disadvantages of deploying with Gatsby Cloud versus another CMS like Netlify.
Yeah, incremental builds and preview. As far as I know, Gatsby Cloud is the only platform that supports those two, like truly supports it. Like incremental builds, I think other services say they support it, but I think if you do the test, you'll realize there's a big difference between what Gatsby Cloud does and what other build services do. So yeah, build times is a huge one. You can still deploy, like WPGraphQL.com is hosted, the actual CDN is Netlify still, so Gatsby Cloud does the build and pushes it to Netlify. But then Gatsby Cloud also runs things like Lighthouse reports for you, so you can see any given time when like your accessibility degraded or improved, your speed, things like that. You can tie it to specific commits in your code base, which is really cool. And if you're working in a team, there's deploy previews as well. So if somebody on your team opens a pull request, before it deploys, it can Gatsby Cloud will generate a preview of what that pull request would do. So you can preview how code changes would work before deciding to publish it. So there's a lot of really cool stuff with Gatsby Cloud, and I'm having a blast using it for WPGraphQL.com.
Thanks, Jason. A few more questions for Robin and Blaine. First one is, how much time did the migration to Gatsby take for the real Cedar site?
That's probably more question for Robin. He did quite a bit of that work manually.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it definitely took a couple of weeks because it was such a huge project. And then we also had to deal with like the multilingual setup, and I'm not fluently in Japanese and Chinese. So this took quite a while to make this work. Yeah, I think I would commit to like maybe 1 to 2 months. Yeah, I think this
1 to 2 months or weeks?
Month. Like 1
Yeah.
to 2 months. Yeah,
because I think the issue was, well, Robin, we didn't use any tools to do the migration because of the way the multi-language was set up, correct? Like it's very difficult to do an import or an export from the existing site because we're using a different multi-language plugin, and then just, you know, kind of copying things over with some automation to the new site. Is that correct?
So say the multilingual setup was not the problem. You can import it. The problem was the flexible content fields, because it is possible to like import flexible content elements, but the problem is you have to format like the data in a certain way. And if you like, I don't know, you could do it in an Excel sheet, but it gets pretty messy, I would say. So yeah, it was like manually content migration in the end.
Mm-hmm. And a related question, which will need to be our last since we're running out of time, but how were you able to maintain consistency in components across all the 6 websites?
So yeah, we're using Material UI as like a foundation of our website, and they have like a great theme wrapper. So where you can like add typography settings or add overrides for other components. But yeah, there are like plenty of other libraries out there. I recently tested out Ant Design, which is also great. But I think it's important to start with something and not develop everything from scratch, because this will save a lot of time in the end.
Mm-hmm. Great. And any final words from Jason or Robin or Blaine?
So maybe like the question came up quite a few times. If there's any like theme, or if like the repo is available to the public. And it's not, of course, because it's yeah, like such a big client repo that we don't make it public. But what I'm going to do is publish a starter theme, and I'm probably going to do that under my GitHub name, which is Robin Zimmer 1989. So I think either today or tomorrow I'm going to upload a starter theme where everything should work out of the box.
Great, thanks, Robin. And again, thank you to everyone for joining today and for all of our presenters as well. If we didn't get to your question, there were quite a few that came through. So if you still have a burning question, please send me an email. You have my email already with some follow-up notifications that we'll be sending today with the recording of the webinar. So if there's still a burning question you have, just send it to me and I'll make sure it gets routed to the right person. And if you're ready to get started with WordPress and Gatsby, go to gatsby.dev/WordPress. That's where you can start using the plugin, the experimental plugin. And let us know your experience, and thank you again for joining.